Howdy folks, welcome back to another video. We're going to do some maintenance on the Concours for you Concours enthusiasts and owners out there. I thought you might like to see the area underneath the windshield, underneath this cover that houses all the mechanical aspects, the tracks and the arms and so forth for the electrically adjustable windshield. This has been an area of concern that I've read over the years for various Concours owners that have actually had the arms break. I can't exactly tell you what the reason for that is. In my particular case, I like to inspect it like once a year or every other year or so to make sure that there's no cracks forming, make sure it's all good and lubricated, clean it the best I can, and just make it function as well as I can, because I have a C. Bailey's aftermarket windshield which are no longer manufactured, and it's a C. Bailey's tall. It's thicker than the original one, taller than the original one, and because probably not so much of the weight due to its thickness, but the forces of being it taller than the original, pushing against this puts a lot of strain on these parts of the mechanism. So we're going to go in there and take a look at it, identify some of the parts. If you've never seen that inside before, I think this will be of value to you. I'm also going to cover some issues with these guys. These plastic covers essentially lock the windshield into the arms, the flat part of the arms, which you'll see here momentarily. These are pretty integral to that. And if what happens is when you have a thicker windshield on, like this one, the bottoms of these can break out. And I'll show you the reason why, and then these things will just fly off on the interstate, and I don't think you'll lose your windshield, but they do help secure it to those arms. So anyway, I'll show you all that when we take it apart and as we put it back together. So let's go ahead and get right to it. These are, what is this, a 4mm Allen wrench. Take these guys out. This is not the only thing that holds this windshield in. There's another, at least one underneath here, the big, I think it's just one. You'll see it when I take it apart. There's a special plastic, not a bushing, but kind of a plastic washer. Normally I keep these plastic guys in stock here, so in case they break, you know, I have some extra ones, you know, to replace them with. These are, you know, replacements from a couple of years ago, so probably time to do that. But usually they're stuck down here because it's rubber underneath there, so just gotta kind of carefully pop it back. I normally would recommend something plastic, but this windshield is pretty trashed anyway. Anyway, you take the plastic off, and you got this rubber piece underneath here, this gasket. You will see that you have one big bolt here, and there's, like I said, there's a plastic piece underneath here, which I'll show you. It's like cone-shaped, almost like a little top hat washer that help holds that in. In other words, so you don't have direct contact of the screw against the windshield, potentially crack it. I'll get the other side off over here, and we'll come back to this one. Move back to here, like I said, this is an M5 fastener as far as the tool goes. I'm pretty sure it's an M6 thread, but the tool I'm talking about is, use that tool, is M5. M6, I'm sorry, yeah, it's a little M6. Kind of a special fastener as well. All right, so inside here there's this little plastic thing, which is just this. I guess top hat washer is not the right description. It's more like a beveled washer plastic. That's really important to have here so you don't have direct forces against that plastic with the metal, you know, the steel fastener, and it just kind of dampens that a little bit. I think on one of these I lost one. I think this one over here, I lost one, and I made one out of like a, I don't know, a little piece of plastic like the lid of a coffee can, you know. So I'm going to order a couple more of these. That's all you're going to need to do to take this windshield off. So that's what we'll do next. I'll set it aside. What I obviously need to do is I need to give this a good cleaning. Probably end up polishing some of the scratches out with some polishing compound and kind of get it back in a little better shape. Now it's probably going to be stuck down to the rubber on the other side of this as well. You can't always rely on that. Well, if I made one for that, it must be missing, because I could have sworn I did. It may have deteriorated and fallen off sometime. I don't know. All right, I found it. It was actually still stuck in there. I didn't see it because I forgot I made it out of black material. I think it's like a coffee can lid, like a Folgers. And so that is just like the white one on the other side. I'm going to order some new ones because these things eventually do wear out. You know, they kind of get smushed and spread out a little further. I'm sure they're not too expensive, so I'll go get some online. But meanwhile, this will work fine. On the back side, you got these guys, one on each side. So the windshield essentially sandwiched between rubber. So here's your arms for the main mechanism. And to get at the mechanism, just got to take this cover off. So you got two screws that are M4s as far as the tool goes, and then you got these little pop rivet deal, plastic rivets. These aren't so bad because they're the ones you push in and it releases it, and then you pop them out. Not a bad idea to have some of these on hand too. I do actually have a few of these out in the shed in my Concours spare parts bin. I do have some spare parts in a bin. This is also a really good time. You can give this a good cleaning, because it's really hard to get at, even with the windshield in the fully raised position. And by the way, speaking of the windshield, I'll try to remember to cover this later as well. But on the Concours, you can essentially have this set up. I don't remember what the programming is, but you can program this to have this come up. As soon as you turn the ignition on, start the engine, it'll come up to a predetermined level. I don't choose to use that, but that is available. Look in your owner's manual. But the thing that I think a lot of people miss, if you want to clean underneath here with the engine and ignition off, all you have to do is start the engine, or at least turn the ignition on. Use the button on the left handlebar to raise the windshield up, and hold that up windshield button while you turn the ignition off. That will lock it in that position with the ignition off. Next time you cycle the ignition and then you turn it back off again, it'll bring it back down to its normal resting position, whatever that is. I'm assuming that's always retracted. I think the automatic adjustment only relates to a height, a predetermined height, once the ignition is turned on. But like I said, I don't use that. But I do use the one where you lock this thing up when I clean it. There it goes. Maybe it's like, that's it. That's it. You pop out the top and lift it out the top. That's what it is. Okay, there's the mess. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is go get the fob, and I'll cycle the windshield up and down so you can see it with this cover off, so you can see the action of the mechanism, and it'll help you understand how this thing works. Fully up. Down. And I'll show you the other thing I was talking about before. So if I bring it all the way into the up position and I leave it pressed, turn off the ignition, it stays there. So now, you know, your windshield's attached, you can kind of get at underneath there and get at the windshield a little easier. Actually, the inside of it in particular, because it's raised up above the visor here. Next time we cycle the ignition, it'll resume its base position. So that's how it works. And you can see the mechanics of it. So let's take a look at where potentially we're going to have failure points. Okay, this is the right side. You zoom up a little bit more for you. This is the track on the inside of it. You can kind of feel the opening, but I can't show it to you. You can kind of see it from the top there. You see the opening of that track. Apparently there's some sort of an idler wheel or something inside there that's attached to this arm right here. And then it brings it together to the center section, which is kind of a guide. You can see that this is a guide here that goes up and down on. And then the other side's pretty much the same. You see that track. Now, as far as what arms break, I'm assuming it's these guys right here. They're going to have the most stress on them because the fact that they have the windshield mounted directly to it. I don't believe that there'd be a whole lot of potential for anything underneath there to break, like the little wheels or anything like that. So most likely is the arms themselves that people have experienced problems with. Now I think there's a lot of play in this thing. And I remember a few years back, I did something to take up on that play. I think it's in this bottom section here. I took it apart. I think I took this arm off, and then I looked underneath there and made some sort of a shim or something to tighten that up, because there was a lot of play in it. And the more this thing can rock back and forth, the more stress I believe it causes on the adjacent parts. It just makes sense, because this is essentially what that does. When it slides up and down, it keeps this thing from doing this a whole lot. That was the part that I was always most concerned about. So anyway, let's go ahead and take this arm off. I'm pretty sure I can do that without any issues. So pull this arm off, we'll take a look at it underneath there. You get a better view of that. These are M8s. I gotta be honest with you, I can't remember if I've taken this apart or not, but I'd really like to get in here and give it a good cleaning. She's still got some Loctite on her, but it may have been something I put on when I put it back together, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't appear that this thing nothing's gonna go flying anywhere, so let's just go buzz that off. That's original Loctite, so I may have never taken this one apart. Yeah, see this, what I was afraid of is this thing would kind of collapse in or come off track, but it makes sense. It's got to be just a stability, and again, to keep it from doing this, as opposed to, you know, more of a lateral alignment. Both of these, or all three of these rather, this and the arms are all aluminum, by the way. I would think that they would make these out of steel, but Why would they, you know? Yeah, it just comes off like that. So it's got a hook. See, it's got like a hook thing. So it hooks into that, and this may be part that breaks too, because, you know, it doesn't look like it's too thick. I could have sworn I shimmed this up with something over the years. I just can't remember what I did now. I thought I had done something, but anyway, let me blow some of this stuff out of here, and we'll take a look deeper and see. There's a lot of dirt and crap in here, which is to be understood. The fact that it's not like a watertight seal or anything. Mainly, I'm just going to be inspecting, reaching in here, and cleaning everything. Get a little bit of maybe some more lithium grease, or at least some silicone or something into the tracks and so forth. Probably silicone better than grease that I've used before. But yeah, so I don't know if it's this arm that breaks or if these arms break or what. There's obviously a ton of stress. I mean, maybe not a whole lot, because this thing does have a certain amount of, you know, ability to maintain its attitude this way. We move it back and forth, you can see it's got a little play. So this thing really is the thing that keeps it from folding backwards at you at speed when there's pressure on it from the wind. You know, maybe this is what breaks, I don't know, but I don't think it is. I think it's these arms that people have talked about breaking before. Like I said, I kind of just like to look at them and make sure there's no cracks in them, and then just do a really good cleaning and then put it all back together. All right, you know, I am really curious to see what the back side of this looks like. You know, with that little, apparently some sort of a little wheel or something that rides up and down in that track. There appears, I figured there may be two, but there's only one. And again, that center section keeps it stable. So let's pull the dangly bit camera out and use the side camera on it. We'll stick it down in here and we'll take a look at those. I'd really like to get a look at those, a good look at those anyway, to do an inspection on them. And since I can't look at it directly from this side, and this is closed over here, that'd be the only way to do it. Let's give it a try at least. Really curious here if I can get a look at it. All right, so as you can see from a little B-roll of the camera, at where this goes inside this track, part of this bracket is all you can see, the actual arm. But when you stick it down inside, you can see what it is. It's actually a block. I thought it was like a little wheel or something. It's a block that slides inside this channel. And since that channel is essentially almost a square with an opening, so it's essentially a U-shaped channel, and it's got a little lip inside there. That is really all it is. So you have a certain amount of play in there, of course, because number one, you know, for fitment and, you know, to accommodate for dirt and shit that's going to get in there. Number two, for the fact that, you know, it's going to wear over time. So it looks like some sort of a nylon block, or perhaps the same material as on the end of this thing. I'm assuming that's like nylon or something like that. I don't know, but it looks the same color as that. So that's pretty interesting. I did not know that that's how this thing tracked inside the track. You know, I thought, like I said, with a little wheel. You have little wheels here for the cable, goes up and down. My main concern is inspection, cleaning, and looking at it to see how it's made, so I can kind of better understand where a failure point might be. So you can see that block down in there. That's it right there. And it's the same thing as what we saw on the other side, of course. But boy, there's a lot of dirt in there. I wish there was a way I could clean that, but I don't know if I can flush it with anything. So I think maybe some silicone spray, air compressor or something like that, but that's all that crud built up on it. I probably lubed it incorrectly over the years by putting lithium grease in there. It's probably a mistake. I didn't have a dangly bit back then. Well, I did, but it was much larger than this, so it would never fit in here. But yeah, so you get the idea. It's pretty cruddy in there. Well, in my ever-progressing effort to complicate or overcomplicate things, I'm going to go ahead and take these side plastics off. They're not easy. They're not hard, rather. Not easy. What am I saying? They're not. They're easy to do. They're not hard to do, to take these guys off. And that way I can get in here and look directly into that space where that track is. If I can get a rag in there, I can douche it with brake clean, dry it out, and then just lube it up with a little bit of silicone lube or something. Because that is awfully packed with crap in there. I don't want to leave it that way. I really don't, now that I've seen it. Pretty sure if I open this guy up... Well, anyway, when I turn the ignition on to open the glove box, I think there's a couple of screws in the bottom to pull that out. Pretty sure that's got to come loose because it goes to a bracket. And then what we can do is just pop the cover off. I got to take this centerpiece off to get at a screw I know that's underneath here. Well, little screw up on that screw thing. There you go, screw and screw. You don't need to take the panel off the top cover to get at a screw to take this cowling off. You do need to take it off to get the cowling off because it extends underneath that cover. But the screw I was thinking of was actually for the side cover, the side upper fairing. So if you're going to take the side upper fairing off, you most definitely need to take this off to get that screw. And thus you need to take the cover off to get this out as well, for the fact that that sticks underneath it. I've had this apart a number of times for things in the past. It's really not that bad. So we'll just pop these two off, and then we'll take a look at that. Maybe we can clean it out better. Oh yeah, baby. Now that's the way to do it. Now I can get right in there now and clean that. I've had these off before, these plastics, as you can see, because these things suck. These tabs here break. So these are called well nuts, and they spread out when you put the screw in and help hold it in place. And this plastic is peanut butter, and so these things break out. Now, how I fixed these before, I have a couple over there. I'll show you closer when we get over that side. But I have these guys. I made these out of like vacuum tea plastics, and you just put it inside this half circle there with some super glue. They hold pretty well. Both of them on the other side have held, but you have to be gentle with these. You can't be freaking all He-Man on them, because they will snap. But it's really a terrible design the way they did this. But you'd have to replace the whole plastics on the front to get that, back into original condition. So that's what I came up with originally. I'll just have to replace this one, because this one kind of fell off when I took it apart. Anyway, yeah, that's the way to do it. We'll clean all these up and then re-lubricate them with some silicone. But you can see when I wiggle this one, how that works. So it isn't actually that block is leaning so much, or going back and forth, I should say, angling. It's just rotating on that piece, which I'm sure it's designed to do, so it has some flexibility. That's pretty cool how they did it. And here's the other side, same thing. Here's the two that I repaired, the well nuts, super glued in, but they seem to hold pretty well, because you got 50% coverage at least from the remainder of that hole. This is ABS plastic, and ABS loves super glue, so it works pretty well. I remember what I did years ago. This is that clip that goes over this spot here. You see I put a little flattened out piece of shrink tubing in there to kind of close this up a little bit, because it just was a little loose on that. Didn't hurt nothing, just increased the, or decreased the clearance in there. And so I'm gonna leave it because it seems to be working fine. I cleaned this up really well. Focus, seems to be just fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this arm back in. We'll raise it up in the air a little bit, and then we'll finish cleaning that out. These are back in with some blue Loctite. I don't have them tight yet, because what I want to do is make sure these things are kind of neutral. These are almost little slotted holes, and that may be just because of variances in manufacturing, but I want to make sure they're not cocked over to one side or wanting to pull another way, one way or the other. This way it's going to, just do what it is, because these are flat surfaces against both sides. I'm talking about, left and right here, so that looks pretty good. I don't know what torque spec is on these, but I'm sure it's good and tight. Click. They're only M5, so they can't take that much. Make sure we haven't screwed anything up. I have a tendency to do that if you haven't already figured that. Now I'm gonna just go down to the bottom here and get that little bottom section out that I couldn't get before. And then we're gonna button her back up, because I think the only thing, I bet you, I don't think it's in the service manual, but I bet you if you were able to get that information from like a Kawasaki engineer, they don't want you to use any lubricant on it at all. It's plastic or nylon, whatever that is, against very smooth metal. That was dumb. That was really dumb of me to actually, I think, use a grease like that, because all it did was attract dirt. So I'm just going to put a little silicone spray in the tracks mainly. I'm not going to worry about this, and because those are somewhat enclosed, and then we'll just leave it. Just give it a little bit of lube. That stuff will dry and just leave a film in there. So film at 11. All right, cool. One last check. This section in the middle here is actually bowed, so the windshield goes up and forward when it comes up. It doesn't actually go straight up and down. So that's what controls that. And I guess that would kind of explain why those things are allowed to rock a little bit on a pivot, because this thing's got to move that way. If those things were fixed and the little blocks in there, it couldn't do that. So that makes a lot of sense. So it's another thing that I didn't know before, but now I do. I knew it did that, but I wasn't sure how these articulated with that. So it's just kind of good to know, because then if you have a failure, you got a better idea in your mind, you know, on the fly in particular, what the problem may be. But after doing an inspection here and seeing how everything looks, I'm confident we can put it back together and it'll work just fine. I might as well do air filter maintenance while I'm in here. I don't believe that's right, 8 of 21. I think I've changed it since then, but it could be right, I don't know. Well, you got to move some stuff, but sure as hell beats taking a side cover off to do this. Come right out, baby. Almost. Come on. Come to Papa. There we go. Yeah, we'll blow that out. That'll be perfectly fine. But it is 8 of 21, so that's only 3 years old. Let's go ahead and talk about these plastic covers that go over where the windshield mounts to the arms. Now, first of all, they're both labeled R and L for right and left, but it does fit this way. Now, here's what happens with these if you have an aftermarket windshield, or perhaps it might happen with a stock windshield over time, but what I'm going to talk to you about is mitigating these things cracking out on the bottoms here. When you have an aftermarket windshield that's slightly thicker than the stock windshield. So you see these features right here, and I'll explain the washer here in a second, that's part of it. This little edge right there goes and meets this edge right here. But this part of this boss where that screw goes in is slightly smaller on the top. And it actually fits inside this profile right here. So if you have a thicker windshield, because it's designed to have this thing seat down on top of here with a stock windshield, with a thicker windshield, it doesn't come down to that point because this pushes it out a little further. So you might have 20, 30, 35 thou of space between the bottom of this plastic counter bore and where this thing is supposed to seat. So if you just tighten that down with a screw, it's going to blow this bottom out because it's going to pull it away. Because of course it can't move here because it's up against the windshield, and that is not yet up against there because of the thickness of the windshield. So to mitigate this, what I've done is I super glued, a couple of years ago I did this, super glued some stainless washers in. I think I had to kind of file down the OD on them to make them fit in here, but that's really easy to do. And I think they're about 30 thou thick. I wish I could get one out to measure it for you, but like I said, they're super glued in. I don't think I can, so you're gonna have to kind of guess. But if I zoom up on one, you can kind of get an idea what it looks like as far as thickness goes. So what this does is it brings this spot closer to that spot when there's a thicker windshield. Because again, we don't want this thing sitting here and it pulling against this plastic with it unsupported underneath. This essentially bridges that gap that is there because of the extra thickness of the windshield. So it works very well. I did this a few years ago and it hasn't cracked. So either that or you got to keep a bunch of these extras in stock and carry them with you, because these things will break and just fly right off. The screws will be in there because it breaks around the plastic. So that's one way you can get around this and mitigate it, is to just you know, turn down or file down the OD of a stainless washer. It's about 30 thou thick. Glue it in there if you got a thicker windshield, that is. It may require a different thickness washer depending on the windshield, but this is a C. Bailey's, as I said before, which is actually quite thick. So now this works perfectly. So I kind of wanted to explain that at this time when I'm putting it all back together. Well, that's about it on this one. The inspection, cleaning, and just general maintenance of the electric windshield mechanism on a Concours 14. I didn't quite understand how it all really worked until I got into it on this particular time that I'm showing you on this video. I haven't really gotten into it that deep, said the wife. So I'm really glad I did, said the wife, because now that I really know how that works, I can be better suited to keep it clean and to inspect it properly and see that it actually works properly. You know, before your next trip, it's a good idea to do this, maybe every couple of years, take it apart, clean it, inspect it, see if there's any cracks in the arms, if everything's moving, you know, kind of the same direction, not twisting around, because you don't want your windshield flying at your head at 80 miles an hour on the interstate, that's for darn sure. So if you like what you saw, you know what you need to do, you stick around, ring the bell, like, share, subscribe, you get notified when I put more crap like this up. So until then, thanks for watching. As always, don't just repair, restore. And we'll see you on that next video.